Summer is here, and that means it's time for summer events at Serenbe. Throughout June and July, join us every weekend for live music Fridays on the farmhouse porch, the Saturday farmers market and farm tours, a bevy of weekend wine tastings, goat yoga, and you can tour our furnished model homes. We also have lots of special events, which include multiple film screenings hosted by the Art Farm, a floral arranging class at Serenbe Farms, and of course, the annual Chat Hills 4th of July parade. Head to the events calendar in our show notes to learn more. We'd love to see you this summer in Serenbe. Anne and Walter Henegar started making regular visits to Serenbe in 2008 and purchased their Mado townhome 10 years later, becoming beloved part-time residents. So beloved, in fact, that many neighbors don't even realize that they aren't here full-time. When the Henegars aren't in Serenbe, they're up in Atlanta running Westside Presbyterian Church, which they founded together with a group of core friends in 2007 with a vision to build community and connection in one of Atlanta's most racially and economically stratified neighborhoods. In this conversation, Steve and I were thrilled to learn more about Walter and Anne's backgrounds, what led them both to a life in ministry and service, Walter as Westside Senior Pastor and Anne as Director of Spiritual Formation, and how we can all become stewards of healthy and positive growth. When we drive down here on Thursday, we kind of do a mental note of how high our shoulders are up to our ears, how tense we are. And then as we were returning on Sunday, we're like, pay attention, compare and contrast. They're always lower. We're always breathing deeper. Walter, Anne, welcome to Serenbe Stories. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well,
we always learn something new, even though we say hi on the street. This is always a great time to dig into some new things.
That's right. So to kick us off, we always want to know what our guest Serenbe story is. And really, when we're asking that, we're saying, how did you learn about Serenbe? What was your first interaction with it? And how did you come to be our neighbors?
I think it was around 2008 when we first started visiting Serenbe on our days off. And we take Fridays off. And we've been coming down for a long time, just sort of hanging around, acting like we lived here. And it wasn't until 2018, after Anne's mother had passed away and she was able to use some of the funds from her mother's estate in order to buy a townhouse here. So in 2018, we bought our townhouse and we walked into the Serenbe real estate office and realized that Gil Mathis and I had gone to high school together. He was a year ahead of me in Chattanooga. So we had that instant connection. And most of the time since 2018, we've been spending Fridays and Saturdays here. And then in 2021, we had a 6-month sabbatical where we spent most of it here at Serenbe and felt like we got to know a lot of our neighbors much more deeply during that time. People keep telling us, when are we going to move here full time? Because that's the Serenbe story. But our work is so anchored in the city right now that it's probably 15, 20 years off retirement for us.
Oh, wow. And sometimes there's one partner or spouse is more drawn to Serenbe than the other. Was it sort of a mutual thing, or were you like, I don't know, that seems outside of the city, or was there any of that dynamic?
Not at all. I think we were both equally drawn. I had a friend that first introduced us to Serenbe back in 2008. I felt like I was hit and go to try to be down here. We're both from Tennessee, and so we like being outside in nature. And we were trying to find something that was close because when we would come down, our kids were in school. So we had to do something pretty quick to get back to carpool. And it's a great 45-minute down and back. So yeah, we were eager to be here together.
Yeah. So your kids are all out of the house. Tell us a little bit about that. Where are they? And do they pop down sometimes? I know I've met Emily, but I don't know if I've met your other ones.
Yeah. Our oldest is Abigail, and she's 26 and she's married, just celebrated her first anniversary yesterday. And his name is Daniel. And then Emily is 23. So yes, they very much love coming here. They will have friends in town. They have to make a Serenbe stop. They want to take the photos and all the things. sleepovers and everything. And Emily's even like, okay, so when are we going to get our next house here? So they're eager to be here.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, and Emily has a cookie empire, so maybe she can buy her own house. Tell us about that. I mean, everybody kind of uses her. Cookie in the Kitchen, right, is the business she founded. How did that happen? That's kind of a crazy story. And we'll drop in the show links, her Instagram.
I'll share a little bit. When she was 11, her older sister had a little business on Etsy selling clay figurines, and she wanted to start her own business. So she started baking cookies for friends and neighbors, and pretty early on began to decorate them and sell kind of custom cookies for birthday parties and weddings and so forth. Ended up making them for bands. So she would, in junior high and high school, she would go to see certain bands and wait behind the venue after the show to give these cookies to the bands. And they would tag her Instagram account, and she started building up followers and honing her skills. And now she contracts with arenas and management companies, corporate clients that very often just want videos of her making cookies. They don't even want the actual cookies. So she's managed to make a living doing it. She went to college to study entrepreneurship, and 12 years in, she's going strong.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And she honestly identifies herself more as an entrepreneur than even a baker. Like, she talked with Matt Adolphi about working at Star Provisions. So she got an internship with Star Provisions in high school. And it was Annie actually that told her to go to get her business degree and not go into culinary school, because you could always, you need to know the business side of running a restaurant, as I'm sure Steve and Marie know, and not just the baking aspect. And honestly, when she was in her entrepreneurial classes, they convinced her. I mean, she said, I identify more as an entrepreneur than anything. The risk taking, being innovative. And so she's often running in that direction. She's a marketing genius too, has a lot of followers on TikTok. And really what the corporations want is her as an influencer. So she's done some collabs with Target and MTV, like 3 or 4 years. She just did a collab with Chacos and Outdoor Voices. So she has a really fun life, I'll say. She just did cookies for Taylor Swift herself 3 nights, and she's set to do Beyonce next, and she's done Dolly Parton. So it's really fun. People say they follow her just to see who she's doing next, and also to learn a lot of good music, because she does a lot of indie musicians too in Nashville. So
it is. I can sit for days and watch her Instagram. I'm not a big TikToker, but the videos of these icings, these super intricate cookies with this incredible icings. I mean, it is a piece of work. The artistry is incredible. So we'll link her in there. And our neighbors, our mutual friends, the Sharps, Megan and Patrick, used her for our show house last year. They had cookies made. But I love that you're saying that people use them just to do the videos, which is actually really clever and makes me think, Steve, that would be a really fun anniversary to do a bunch of cookies about Serenbe. So we'll have to remember that idea for a future thing. Her mission is celebrating and illustrating unique lives in edible artwork. That's what she says. And I think to that point, it's not just about, it is like graphic design on a cookie, but I think if she did something, say for Serenbe, she would do a deep dive in the research to understand all the kind of inside intimate things. Like when she did Taylor Swift, she did a cookie of her parents' Christmas card when she was a toddler. So it wasn't like, sure, there's all the famous images from Taylor, but she likes to know deeply about a person and celebrate them as a human. Very, humanize a person. Just her curiosity, That's part of the learning.
So who is she most like between the two of you?
Well, I do have entrepreneurs in my family. My dad, my sister and mother, and even for us, we started a church. So I guess there's some of that element in us, in her. What would you say, Walter?
Yeah, I think there's a little of both of us in her. We love people, and she's picked up that love. So that's what shows through in her work.
Yeah. Because she loves music so much, she has created 300 plus playlists on Spotify. And one of the things she created was a Serenbe playlist. So if you're driving from the city to Serenbe, the title of the playlist is called Tall Trees. because of the tall trees on, yes, Fulton Industrial, I guess
That's so
154.
cool.
So if you want some music to accompany your trip home or trip to the city, listen to it.
I love that. Okay, we're adding that for sure in the show notes. I'll find that and get it from you guys. If not, that's fantastic. So the segue is perfect to talk about Westside Presbyterian. So Walter, you're the senior pastor and Anne is the director of spiritual formation. And before we dig into the roles, I want to know, what led you guys to ministry? And maybe Walter can start and then we can pop back to Anne and talk about, because it's ministering to people, it's building a community, but it's also building a business. So where did that come from? And was that something that came from the two of you together, or were one of you in that world beforehand?
Yeah, well, the both of us came into the world a month apart, and we actually met as infants. That's a fascinating little piece of our story. We have a photo at 2 and 3 months old holding hands. We might need to put that in the...
We definitely need that.
But our fathers grew up together, so our families knew each other, Knoxville and Chattanooga. We didn't see each other a lot until college, and it was college when both of us started getting involved in student ministry. And Anne actually sensed a calling to ministry before I did and began working in ministry right after college. I was determined to do anything but that. I started out as an engineering major. I was going to be in the Marine Corps. And I'm deaf in one ear, so they took away my Marine Corps scholarship, and I ended up becoming an English major. I realized I had a disposition for ministry at that time, but I didn't have the maturity. And I really didn't have even the intellectual maturity to get into ministry at that point. I'd say my faith was a little bit like trying to drive a shopping cart through a trail in the woods. I just couldn't get through real life with what I believed at the time. So I had to grow up a lot. And while Anne was doing ministry early in our marriage, I was working as a carpenter and a business writer, and eventually got through seminary and came to Atlanta.
Did you guys meet then in college again? Were you at the same college, or did you guys meet back here in Atlanta?
I went to Northwestern and Anne went to UNC Chapel Hill. And so we dated long distance. We ran into each other at family weddings.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Nice. So, Anne, did you did you see in him that he could do it? He could push that shopping cart through the woods?
Yes. I was at Chapel Hill in accounting business major, but I found that I was ministering more to just my friends. I could barely get out of my dorm room for talking to a lot of women to go to my classes. And I found this love for just people more than Excel spreadsheets. And so that's not hard for most people. And so, I just felt I was in a master's of accounting program, and I withdrew from that to join a ministry at Vanderbilt. And we were graduating around the same time. So he's like, well, I could go to really any city, might as well go to Nashville too. So once we got married almost right away. I got a chronic health issue in 95. I have Crohn's and a whole bunch of other autoimmune stuff. And so what I thought that I was going to do at Vanderbilt really it didn't pan out that way. I ended up being really sick, and a lot of people ministered to me, and they would come over to our house. And then I got pregnant with Abigail right away too. So we were newly married, fresh out of a really hard illness and a newborn baby. And so I had a lot of rich relationships and a lot of deep relationships because I needed them. I wasn't just, here, let me help you. I was like, actually, I need you to help me. And that really deepened a lot of our relationships, which my pathway through ministry really, because of that, a lot of suffering and sorrow led me into more of a counseling route and ministering to people more deeply at a emotional level.
Mm-hmm. And can I ask that, because I think the title is interesting that you have, Director of Spiritual Formation. Is that a common title, or is that something that you created?
Yeah, exactly. It is not very common. A lot of people are like, what is that actually? So before our sabbatical, my title was like a Director of Discipleship, which is really just helping people grow. And over sabbatical, I thought, I feel like I need to shift a little bit. I like working with men and women in this deeper place. And so I'm writing some curriculum. So I like to write, which I've listened to some of your other stories. I'm like, we should have a little writers group here at Serenbe. Sounds fun. So I'm doing that. And also just, like I said, just loving and helping people grow however they need to. So I think spiritual direction is a type of, I think a lot of people are familiar with that, just attending to somebody as they're communing with God and other things like that too. So,
and how did you guys decide? And forgive me for my maybe ignorant question, but like you guys formed the church, right? This is your church. So how does one do that? And like, why Atlanta? And like, tell me a little bit about that. And how long have you had it?
We were serving in a church in Buckhead starting in 2002 when we first moved to Atlanta. But the closest we could afford to live to Buckhead was the Westside. And it was sort of transitional at the time. And a lot of people had moved into the neighborhood because they wanted to know their neighbors and they cared about the actual local environment. And we found as we were serving a church that was very regional, we really wanted to know and serve our neighborhood. So we started the church in 2007 as a very local, organic, hyper minimalist sort of operation where it was all about just knowing your neighbors. There's no advertising. We met in this quirky little art gallery called the DeFore Center for almost a decade.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful experiment. And for a lot of the reasons we love Serenbe, we wanted people to actually be in relationship with each other, not just sort of be consumers of religious goods and services.
Yeah. And something you would often say early on is that relationships happen over leisure, which you could say the same thing about Serenbe. Like it's just walking from one place to another. You stop and talk with your neighbors and that deepens your relationship. And you didn't plan for that to happen, but that does deepen those bonds. Tell them what Adrienne said.
Yeah, we had a friend at a play group in our neighborhood in Underwood Hills that said at one point, she said, I just want a church that's like our neighborhood where we all know each other and are part of each other's lives. And we thought, yeah, we'd really like to do that. And I think also, I mean, part of the beauty of being neighbors as well is you're forced to be in relationships with people you might not know otherwise. And all kinds of beautiful serendipitous things happen that way. And I think that was part of our vision was that the church would be porous in the sense that people often think of religious institutions as like, well, that's where they go to do their thing. And the rest of us have our life outside of that. And we wanted the church to be a place that there was a lot of porous interaction between people on the inside and outside, and a place that's safe for doubts and questions and objections. And we find that sort of that seam between people of faith and people of all kinds of other backgrounds is actually a really invigorating, generative kind of place to be. And that's been a big part of what's driven our church.
And what's the size of your membership now?
Well, our membership is about 750 now, and that's changed. And this is another, I think, Steve, we've talked about this before, that Serenbe, as it's grown, the intimacy from the early days that people had has changed, right? And so as you grow into a larger, more complex place and organization, you're always working to try to, like, how do we preserve the magic? How do we preserve the ethos that was there at the beginning on a larger scale? We've very much been in that process for the last few years.
And I think you, Steve, seeing you around often, like you can't go a day or two without seeing you driving around. Like I think your presence and your accessibility really helps that. And I think that's something that we've been trying to do at Westside is everybody can't have our cell phone numbers, but how do we engage in a way that helps people feel like we're not off in some ivory tower, that we can be with people? And I think you do a great job of that, Steve.
Oh, thank you. So how far now do you reach?
The vast majority are from a 5 or 10 mile radius. There are a handful that come up from Serenbe on Sunday mornings and make a sort of day trip of it. But yeah, the vast majority are pretty close. I mean, in our little neighborhood where we can walk to church, we've probably got 75 to 100 people in the church that are right there next to it.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting observation of that, you're at 750 members and, Serenbe is now over 1,000 people, but probably 600-ish households. And it does change, right? But I think setting the intention of a place, or I always like the word platform, like you create a platform for conversation. And I think that's different from building community. But I think having people of different backgrounds, different faiths, different beliefs that can come together in a very respectful, open way to have those open dialogues on any topic, religion, but coming with an open heart, I think is so important. And I think ideally, if we can all keep that going and spread that ethos, that's what the world needs,
Absolutely. And we're better for it as we grow and sharpen each other in the midst of those conversations. And I think too, having what affectionately call the OGs of Westside or Serenbe, having those people have a growth mindset of like, well, it is. And Steve, you were the first one having to share the wealth of your family running through the woods and the creeks with all of us. And I think healthy things grow. And so you want to steward that growth well. And so I feel like there are people that honestly couldn't make that change of our growth have moved on. Quite honestly, it was hard for them, but people that have stayed, that were there from the beginning, we often say like, wow, we couldn't imagine Westside without this couple that just came in the last 6 months. Like they're now part of who we are. And that dynamic relationship, there's an energy to it that's beautiful. So it's hard, it's challenging, and there's things to grieve. I think you can't walk through the streets of Serenbe and not have people say, oh, remember this, but then, hey, look at this, or look at this person that's here now. And I think it starts with you. You have to have that enthusiasm for the future while holding on to the past.
Yeah, that's well said.
People are afraid of change many times, and yet change brings us the real vitality.
Yes.
I don't want to be like as if you're going to 10 time your membership, but like, do you have a vision of what growth is or what is sustainable? Or would you ever, and this, I'm again, ignorant question, would you ever create satellites? Or, you think about people as they build brands and businesses, they're like, oh, I'm going to put another one over here. But obviously that's hard without you guys or the Nigrans. Like we're not going to build another Serenbe, but do you have thoughts? And I'm sure that's a constant conversation. It's a great question.
It is. We do not have ambitions for size and scope. I'd like to write more, but I don't want my face or my video image spread around. And I think that the best things that happen in our community, I'm a catalyst for them. I'm not the thing. And so we might grow more. What I've been saying for a number of years is we want to be as healthy as possible in every sense. And size, growing bigger, well, I would say I'm indifferent toward it. Honestly, I'm kind of afraid of it. On an emotional level, I have some resistance to it. But I think when I'm healthier, I'm willing to just accept, okay, if we get bigger because things are out of our control, we'll trust God to help us figure out how to do it.
We're trying to build those systems in place where, like early on, we had mentors and what they call it church planting, which I like that image because you think of a plant that's being planted into the ground. It needs a lot of health and help to get rooted. And like you're saying, when it can propagate, yes, there can be some healthy things also that move forward in it. But I think being able to have that we are the hub of the wheel at the beginning, to shift metaphors. And my mentor was like, you can't stay the hub of the wheel. Like you're going to have to move out. And so you've got other people in the spokes of that wheel, which makes it sustainable because we're not always going to be here. We're going to retire at some point, and it can't just be about us. It never has been about us, but we had to be that first strike the match, but like really putting it into the hands of other people and building those systems where they can get connected. That is wonderful to see people finding their home, finding their spouses, finding other people like that together. And we had nothing to do with it. And it's really beautiful. It has a life, not unlike a child. You do a lot to grow them, but then they're off and they're doing their own thing and they become their own people. It's beautiful to watch.
Yeah. And I think Steve, you haven't done it as much, you're writing, Steve, but when you would do the Facebook posts, and a lot of these were sort of to our internal Facebook neighbors, where Steve would tell the history and the stories. And I think imparting that storytelling, and maybe even some of these will be part of that, of giving the background and the ethos to other people to then take in, and then they hold it as their own and can then share it back out.
No, exactly. I find that there's a tendency to think everyone has come along with you, and you realize that people have joined the story at various times, and we have to repeat. And even for the people who've been there, because it's like, what's that game when you tell a secret and you start whispering, it gets around the circle, it's a complete different message. So it's just to reinforce some of the foundation things we've found.
Yeah.
Great that you all have been, you have really, for being part-time residents, you have really dipped into the community. And I bet there are a lot of people that do not realize you're only here a couple days a week.
We delight to meet people and get to know people. And it's one of the great joys of being a part of Serenbe. And we trust you, Steve and Garney, and everyone else involved in shaping Serenbe. We just feel so incredibly blessed to have anything to do with this place. You're just not going to hear us complaining at town hall meetings because we're just too thrilled we get to be here.
Right. The honeymoon hasn't worn off at all. In fact, when we drive down here on Thursday, we kind of do a mental note of how high our shoulders are up to our ears, how tense we are. And then as we were returning on Sunday, we're like, pay attention, compare and contrast. They're always lower. We're always breathing deeper.
We also have
the value of nature.
Yes.
Well, we embrace nature. That's part of the whole thing.
Which is wonderful. I've been thinking about this, the biophilia and how much you love that. And that's so important to Serenbe. It's fun to think that God was the first biophilia lover, or that's lover of nature lover, but nature is his idea. And of course, our bodies, this is how he made us, that we need nature and nature needs us. And so that symbiotic relationship is beautiful.
There's a fascinating little thing in the Hebrew Bible in Genesis 1 that the name for humanity is Adam, and the name for the dirt is Adamah. And so in the very beginning of the Hebrew Bible, it's telling us through language that the people are connected to the dirt.
Well, and we're all connected, all living systems, the microbes, you really can't separate it. And once you start to understand that, it gives you a different perspective on life, no matter where you're in the city or out in the middle of a forest.
Amen.
Well, as we wrap up, I would love to know if somebody was coming for the first time, what would you recommend that they do at Serenbe while they're here? What can't they miss? What should they be doing? For me, I love to explore. One of the things that we did, we had a sabbatical back in 2013 and we went to Vancouver, British Columbia, and our desire was to rest, play, and find beauty. And that's one of the reasons we chose Serenbe, because it had all those things. And that's why we love Vancouver. We didn't have to really travel around. It had it all right there. And when Walter and I were so deprived of play that we had to have a shared note on our phone to be like, okay, what do we like to do again? What is fun for us? And it was like, we were remedial at play. And one of the things that we found that we loved to do was explore, like what's around the corner, what's here, what's in nature, what kind of food or restaurants. And that is one thing that we love about Serenbe is it is evolving constantly. So it's very stimulating. But one of the things that I would say, there's one thing to find, like a hide and go seek for our treasure hunt for Serenbe, is the plaque on the ground by the creek that says, "Be still and know that I am God," which comes from the Bible. It's Psalm 46:10. And then it says, be still and know that I am, be still and know, be still and be. And for the longest time, I think it's one of Garney's favorite things. And I would see her post about it, but nobody told me where it was. And so it was a fun exploration. I remember texting some friends when I finally found it. I was like, oh, I found it. So, well, pro tip, you're going to have to go find it now. Yeah.
So,
it is magical when you do find it, because you're like, who put this quote in metal in the ground here? So I love that that's out there.
Yes. And I want to know the backstory at some point. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, great.
And then sit and then stare at the water.
And sit. Yes. And there is a bench. We'll give that hint. There is a bench there.
That's right.
I don't have one single Serenbe thing to do, but if I had to choose a representative thing, it would be going to trivia. on Thursday nights at Tulsa.
Hilarious. Yeah.
And the reason I mention that is not because we're that into trivia.
We're not good at all. You do not want us on your team.
Well, it gives you an opportunity to know your neighbors in a different way. And the first time we showed up months ago, we sat with the Dino's family and got to know their boys and all their boys' passions about Braves baseball and Greek mythology. And it's a level that we wouldn't have gotten to if we had sat there and played a game together. So anything that'll get to know your neighbors, but trivia is a great example of one.
It is. And that is packed at Tulsa. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your time this morning with us. And I mean, I know you guys a little bit, personally, and Anne, we just had lunch together, and what a joy to learn more about your background. And I look forward to getting to know you guys even more over the years as we stay neighbors.
We do too.
We do too.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.